major changes to the design after it's built and operating for a while, you could easily insert a fourth lane to what is being built without anything on the edges going further for the right of way. And so I also know that talking to, again, with some of the senior staff, that the governor had instructed them to do a study to see whether or not they could put a rail in the center of the gap project. And I've never heard anything since then.
There's no space now, right? Because they built towards the inside. That's why you have all those Jersey barriers built up.
Well, I didn't know for sure.
Well, what you might or likely will see, at least the plans I've seen, have busting stuff. Like in that center where instead of having a rail line to that whole lane, but they will have like busting. So the busting is a way.
Well,
Jim
that,
Godfrey.
that doesn't necessarily cause me the problems the other does. But I'm not sure what that would do to the potential conversion to what I'm really after. However, I was in a position in Washington to know a lot about passenger rail. And there's not a single major passenger rail facility I have ever seen in the United States that can pay for itself, nor one that came in on budget. And when it's sold to the public, they also don't happen to mention the fares and what's going to be the operating cost and who's going to pay for it. And the truth of the matter is, it has to come out of the general fund. It can't. It's going to be over budget. Planners are either unrealistic or, and I'm a planner. I've got a master's in planning, but they're either unrealistic or they're liars. I don't know which. They never stay under. And they never really get into, okay, and here's what's going to happen once it's built. And I understand if you raise a fare, it's not even like mass transit, which I really like. The buses, you all have a great system that is, and it's expanding. But you can't raise the fares on that, or you will just go deeper and deeper into. If the government wants to pay for it, in other words, the citizens and the government agree, yes, it could even be totally. It could be free, but I don't know many that do that. But anyway, I'm taking too much here.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Jennifer.
How are you?
Hey, everyone. This is Jim. It's a little after 1, so we should probably get started. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Apologize for being remote, but I'm in Gillette, Wyoming, and at a motorhome rally. There's just I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 people here, and about 1,200 or so motorhomes and campers and stuff. So just a few people hanging out in the hot desert of Wyoming. So I've got marginal bandwidth, so I apologize ahead of time in case we get any lag stuff. If it gets too bad, I may ask Reb or somebody to take over while I go across the street and get in the building and hopefully have a little bit better coverage, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. So bear with me just one moment. So Jessica, do you want to just kind of take a tally of who's here and establish an agenda, a quorum and voting members, please?
All right, so we went ahead and took tally as everybody came on, and it looks like we only have a couple of absences here. So I'll just name off everybody that I've seen, whether it's in person or Zoom. So we have Scott Barnhart, Tony Joya, Karen Aspelin, Joan Lucia Treese, Ed Dills, Reb, Craig is our new member here, Cindy Tompkins, Jim Godfrey, Tom Biersba, Jim Moore is absent, Rick Hoover, Ryan Bissiger, correct me if I say that wrong as well, Lawrence Tobias, Richard Robertson, Dave Zelenak, Rick Sonnenberg, Bev, we have Gail and Jennifer. Is there any members that I missed, whether online, in the room? So with that, it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 absences. Is that what you got, Rick?
Just let me confirm. Do we have Jean Bray in the meeting today? Do we have David Chestnut? And do we have Ann Nichols? Okay, then I agree with the 6 absences. Therefore, all alternates can vote.
Okay, and just a little bit of housekeeping. Since we're in the room and online, make sure you're just really descriptive with your words. Not everybody can always see what we're talking about. And then since our chair is online as well, those that are in the room, if you have a comment or need to speak, if you could just raise your hand high and mighty, it's easier for him to see in a little small video out there. We'll do our best to navigate the camera around to catch you, but if you'll just raise it up if you have a comment, that way we can let him know. Other than that, thank you so much.
Great, super. Thank you so much. So as Jessica mentioned, I would like to welcome our member from Green Mountain Falls. Ann Esch, I noticed you were online. Would you like to introduce your replacement person?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't really know Mr. Gooding, but I know that he has accepted my position and I'm anxious to meet him and I wish him well. I'm sure he'll be a great addition and that's wonderful. So I just like to listen in on it anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Greg, on behalf of the CAC, welcome to our committee. Would you like to say a couple of words on your behalf?
Sure. I'm Craig Gooding. There it is. Okay. First try. I am Craig Gooding, and I am from Green Mountain Falls. I've lived there for 5 or 6 years now. I work for Ayers Associates. I'm a map guy and have been for close to 40 years. So I'm looking forward to participating in this committee. I've worked on a lot of transportation projects over the years. So I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this.
Well, thank you and welcome. All right. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved, Reb.
Second, Tom.
Thank you, Reb. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say no. Okay. Thank you very much. Agenda is approved. So item number 3, public comment period for items not on the agenda. Are there any members of the CAC that would like to make a comment about anything not on the agenda?
Jim, this is Larry. I'd just like
Yes,
to
sir.
make a comment that Rick, Gail, Tom, Carlos, and myself, and also the PPRTA chairman and vice chairman attended the bridge dedication a couple of days ago, where they had a presentation beginning with the mayor, and then also had ribbon cutting. And then we walked across the bridge. And it's kind of nice. I know there were some disagreements through our process about some of the landscaping. Reb is giving me evil eye over as I said that. But being down there and seeing the finished product, both the bridge and also the landscaping and also the improvement in the roads and everything, it's really made that area nice compared to what it used to be. So I think the five of us were impressed by what we saw, and it was a good bridge dedication and ribbon cutting.
Great, thanks for that update. I was planning on going, but we left to go out of town with some friends earlier that week before the 4th, and I missed it. I've seen some pictures of the lights at night on it, and it's really pretty at night. So Reb's just going to have to take that to his grave with him.
Hey, I haven't said a word since Rick Hoover said something to me. I just want to know how come it took from 92, or actually 94, then 92, whatever, a former member of the city staff, why it took that long to build something that didn't exist before. I mean, the park that it came from, nor the museum. So, and that they never told the public.
It's because you were against it, Reb. That's why. No.
You know, if I was really against it, I would have been there in protest and said something to them. I want to know if the voters have a clue how much that thing cost. When I say that.
Well, we'll figure it out.
Oh, I'm sure they will eventually.
Are there any members other than the CAC members that are on the call or in the meeting room that would like to have any comments for not on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of the June 2nd meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
So move, Richard. Second, Larry.
Richard, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Okay, motion, minutes are approved for the June 2nd meeting. Financial reports, Ms. Bev.
Good afternoon, members of the CAC. For the April sales and use tax, we've received $12,130,000, which was $2,688,000 above the monthly budget, or 28.5%. So for 4 months, we are ahead still of the amended budget by $9,272,000. On the second page, we are ahead of last year to date by almost 9.6 million and almost 3 million for the month. So we are still doing quite well this year. We'll see if that continues. It's kind of hard to imagine that things are that good, but they are. So are there any questions on the financial reports? There's quite a few other pages that if there's any questions, I'll entertain those.
I can cover that. I have one. I can cover this when we get further on some of the subjects, but I had just some questions on back on, I guess it would be page 10 or so, where we're getting into expenditures and the balances of the different accounts. And I know we're going to come up and talk about Mark Shuffle and some other things later. But is the remaining balances that are in Mark Shuffle Road projects, is the lag in what you're showing on your report and what I'm hearing verbally from some folks, is that just the invoicing process lag, Beverly?
Well, I don't know how much. Well, there's not very much left in the Mark Shuffle projects. So, and I know that the city's just
Right.
doing some design. And it's going to cost a lot
Right.
more than what's left in these projects to do the rest of the design and the construction. So I don't know if you want to ask Gail when she is up at the podium, or if Gail wants to talk about it right now.
Yeah, I will. I will. It's between her and Jennifer, I guess, in just terms of that's the largest remaining pool or project of RTA one money, other than some of the Pikes Peak Greenway projects and some of the others. So I guess as I've mentioned several times in the past, I'm just kind of thinking that we should be at a point going into halfway through RTA 2 or more, that the RTA 1 stuff ought to be wrapping up, and we ought to be able to be bringing closure to those projects and those fund balances on those projects. So that's just the general crux of my question. So whenever the appropriate time is to talk about that would be fine.
One of the things also you have to keep in mind is with Mark Shuffle, especially the Mark Shuffle North piece, we're getting payments from some developers, and they're not huge, but there might be money in that for years to come.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I get a check about every quarter
Okay.
for a cost share. So, all right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
David has a question.
David?
Thank you, David Zelenak. Hopefully you can hear me. Good, thank you. So Bev, this is a great report. I have nothing but praise for you and the great job you've done. I just like to ask a question, or maybe plant a seed in light of the, I'll call it the $1 trillion federal infrastructure program that's being discussed now at the U.S. Congress. I guess the question is, and maybe this is a discussion for a future meeting of this body, I'm sure others as well, how those monies might contribute to either the PPRTA needed funds. You mentioned Mark Shuffle Road, for example. Is there a process? Have we thought ahead, or are we leaning forward into the possibility of taking, pick a number, it's going to be probably for this region a couple $100 million, probably, if you believe some of the news reports. Again, there's a lot of ifs along the way there, but I'd like to maybe ask for discussion. Again, we don't have to have it today by any means, but I would like to plant the seed for the future. How would we, as a community, as a region, the county is, of course, my primary role on this committee, but I also represent 2C and the mayor's paving advisory committee. How would we spend and allocate and assign those funds if we were to be so fortunate? I know there's a lot more questions than answers. You can't answer any of that right now, but if we can at least start to think about a process where we can explore the possibilities, I think that'd be great for a future meeting.
Okay, that sounds great. Jennifer and Gail can speak to
If
it.
you would like, I think it may be good to let you know that as money comes from the feds, it's actually going to be programmed through PPACG, and it would go through the same project prioritization that's laid out in their policies and procedures. And so as that money comes in and we know what years it's going to fall, we'll go through a programming effort like we would for any other federal funding allocation that's going to come from that bill. That doesn't mean that it would be the same if it was discretionary funding, but the stuff that you're talking about, that's how it would come in. I don't know if Jennifer, there's anything you want to add to it. So the process does exist.
Okay.
So it would go towards the TIP projects, right? The stuff that's submitted through the TIP process.
That's absolutely correct, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
Jim?
Jim,
Yeah,
just
go
to
ahead,
add, Jennifer, yeah, and we work collaboratively with the city of Colorado Springs and other member jurisdictions on that process. We've also been working directly on some other federal direct grants with the city of Colorado Springs on some other items, Dave, as you know. So believe me, we're going after every single penny we can for the community. So we've been working very hard, and so is the city. So we appreciate their collaboration. So we work very hard in looking at every single grant that comes available, and also there are limitations on what that funding can be used for. And so, we try and plug that in, as the best way possible to look at some of our high priority projects. So.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I'm sorry, one more thing, if I could add, Jim, too. In addition to what could be coming to that infrastructure bill, I think there's still a chance we would hear from ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act, that from my calculation, we should still be seeing this another 21 million in the next couple of years to be able to program. And that's just scratching the surface of what could potentially come from the infrastructure bill. So the packages that Jennifer and I work together with our staffs and just submitted, pick up what we have for allocations now, what that could be, and we've got some other stuff in the process.
Thank you.
And just for some of the newer members' edification, the TIP is what they call the Transportation Improvement Plan. It is a short range list of projects that are part of the long range transportation plan that's submitted to the state and the federal government. Every 5 years that's updated. We're in the 2040 or 2045 or something plan right now.
Yes.
And then the TIP becomes the near-term projects within that longer range plan. So did I say that right, Gail and Jennifer?
I think that's a good summation, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that is a coordinated process across the region for everybody that's in PPACG, and PPACG as being the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO for transportation projects. So all that federal money kind of goes through them and that process. So hope that helps answer your question, Dave.
Yeah, it sure does. I know that from the, I guess, ARPA funding program, from what we're hearing, the U.S. Treasury rulemaking process is still a bit in flux, as many of you may know. And there's right now more questions than answers on the March money, the ARPA money, much less where we go with this new bucket of money. It's going to be probably the largest sum, unprecedented, that we've ever seen in the region. And hopefully we're leaning forward, I guess, is my only concern. We can handle them quickly and we can scoop up all we can.
And Jim, this is Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
I think one of the things we need to temper our enthusiasm with, though, is it's another pool of money chasing a finite pool of resources to accomplish the work. So I think we're going to see much higher inflation in the process of all the work.
Yes.
A third pool besides PPRTA and C2, or 2C rather, money. So things are going to cost us a lot more.
Well, yes, you're right. That is a potential, and in conversations I've had with the planners and folks, they're all very much aware of that. And the other good news piece of that is that in some cases it's keeping our local contractors and people employed and stuff, and keeping some of the money in our community, and that's always a positive. So. Okay, any other questions on the financial reports or any of that?
Jim, can I make a comment?
Right.
You're not
Go
aware.
ahead, Red.
We have a city staff member that I haven't seen in a long time, and I'm happy that he's here. Corey Farkas is here, and I had a conversation. It was enjoyable. So just for your information, we do have other city staff that aren't here in person for a change. Some of us don't take off to the deserts of Wyoming. Some of us stay around.
Well, that's why I'm retired. And Corey's there representing his outstanding staff.
Yes.
All right, so let's move on with item 6. Be careful, Corey, the floor gets slippery when you stand up around all that stuff. Item number 6, capital maintenance and transportation project, City of Colorado Springs. So you're on, Gail.
All right, thank you, Jim. Gail Sturdivant, City of Colorado Springs. The city is bringing 6 contracts forward for the CAC's recommendation for approval to the board. The first contract is for the Las Vegas and Royer UPRR crossing. And this is for a change order in the amount of $38,752 for FHU. Focus of this change order is to do some additional design service that have come as a result of stipulations in an executive agreement between the city and Colorado Springs Utility. Some right-of-way agreements that were put in place as part of the Warrior street closure. And then some additional requirements that have come from the railroads. You can also see in the change order request that we put together, we try to do a better summation of the change order history for this particular project, as it's been started in 2012 and it's continued to today, just with this prioritization over time. The second contract the city is bringing is for the Circle Drive bridges for HDR in the amount of $159,046. As we mentioned to you all in a memo in April, the city had been approached by the Union Pacific Railroad for some additional design requirements that were different than what they had provided previously and required us to go through a variance request process. We were fortunate to get the variance granted that we requested that required actually the least amount of redesign work on that project. As we recall at the time, we also mentioned when we knew that this was going to be coming up, that we thought the change order value could be upwards to $200,000. So we're glad to see that we were able to get that below that amount. But this is to relocate some of the piers at the request of Union Pacific Railroad. Our third change order is for the Black Forest Road widening. This particular change order is in the total amount of $125,005 for AECom. This cost is going to be split 50-50 between PPRTA and the city stormwater enterprise. What has happened with this road reconstruction work is we've done the widening and the drainage improvements along with this road widening. We've triggered some of the requirements in the city's drainage requirements that require us to look at and potentially propose some channel improvements beyond just our typical discharge, because we are going to have some potential impacts to that channel based on the road's discharge in that area. The city's fourth contract is for the annual maintenance renewal for the Centric software that's used it's a web-based project management software that has been used by PPRTA for several years now. And this is our renewal amount is for $28,343. That cost ends up getting split between the active PPRTA projects. So it's a direct allocation for the projects that's going to be used on for this next year. The city's fifth contract, and as I mentioned, the city would be taking the lead on this design effort with a huge amount of coordination and work product shared from the county, but it's for the Mark Shuffle Road widening between North Carefree and Dublin. And if you had the opportunity to take a look at the city's memorandum, that you can see there's been a long history of work done both by the city and the county starting back in 2005 from the first PPRTA authorization through today. Several pieces south of Woodman Road have been completed, but we have a huge gap in the middle there between North Carefree and Dublin that's still being required. North of Woodman Road, most of that is being done by the developers. PPRTA funds did construct the bridge over Sand Creek in that area, and we would anticipate most, if not all, the rest of that construction north of Woodman Road to be done by developers. But we still have a need to finish the design work and ultimately get to a point where we can complete construction between North Carefree and Dublin. As we mentioned in the budget allocation, there is a systemic safety, congestion, operation capacity issues in that stretch. So we put some monies in both the intersection improvements phase 1 project and also in the roadway safety and traffic operations program fund projects. Plus there's some remaining RTA 1 funds. And I think now I can't remember if it was, I think it was Tom that may have mentioned or sort of bringing up the question about the RTA 1 monies. The city knows for what we have for that Sand Creek Bridge project, well over 28,000 that we can directly allocate today. As we close out that contract, we're anticipating another between 70 and 87,000 that will be able to become available of RTA 1 funding. And then the county has some funds potentially that will be funneled back to there from developer contributions. And the city is also looking at anywhere between 300,000 plus more dollars in additional developer contributions that come into that RTA 1 fund bucket. So I think it kind of maybe starts answering the question, well, why aren't we spending that down? Well, we are spending it down and then we're getting more developer contributions, because if you go and look at that history of that project, it was initially intended to be really an overall joint effort between PPRTA and developers as they went through and did development in proximity to Mark Shelfer Road. So there's going to be funding opportunities for us together. You can see that we are requesting the CAC's approval to do a contract with Wilson and Company for just over $1.23 million. That is going to include a lot of the utility investigation, some resurvey, making sure we have the existing condition, updating the stormwater design to the current standards. And it also has some right-of-way and property acquisition included in that particular scope of work. As I mentioned, with the city taking the lead in this effort, it's a huge coordination that's still going to be going on between the city and the county. And right now that right-of-way has joint jurisdiction. There is a plan in conjunction or parallel with the design work that the city will ultimately be taking over that whole right-of-way. But we still would like to complete this design work and have it ready as additional construction funds are identified to get that work done to address the safety concerns. And then last but not least, the city's 6th contract we want to bring forward is the South Cheyenne Canyon Road 1 over the Cheyenne Canyon Bridge. This is a PPRTA A-list project. This will be the first contract the CAC has seen for this particular work. The city has selected Jacobs Engineering for that work. Their preliminary engineering and environmental analysis is for $239,203. So that will get us going on that. So with that, I would ask for the CAC's recommendation or approval for these 6 contracts, and I'm available to answer questions. It looks like there may be some in the chat, Jessica. I can't quite see.
Jim, this is Tom. I've got a question or a comment.
Go ahead.
Gail, when I looked through that list of contracts, some of them bothered me a bit because what it looks like is happening is that our design contracts, well, maybe not intended to be or called it, they're becoming indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. If you look at the Las Vegas Royer Railroad interchange, the first contract was $100,000 in 2010. 11 years later, 15 change orders later, you still haven't moved any dirt, but we're up to 1.2 million, 10 times the original contract amount. The Fountain Creek Bridge started out in 2018 at 500,000. It's now at 3.9 million for design. And again, no dirt's been moved, but we've gone up 6 times roughly on the original amount. And the Mark Shelfer Road, again, you go back to Wilson because they are the keepers of all of the previous data. But for the final 10% of design, we're paying 1.2 million. And it strikes me that because it's become a habit to always go back to the same contractor that started the original job, that the leverage falls on their side when negotiating.
Okay, well, Tom, let me kind of give you like a high level of what the city does to help control the costs and cost escalations and the steps we take for there. And then I go and specifically talk about the 3 points that you that you made. So in general, when even if we go through a competitive process and we lock in a designer, one of the things we have in our contracts is we typically lock in a rate sheet from the very beginning. So it's either a fixed rates that's going to be through the life of the project, or they have very specific escalation that's allowed just for inflation increases that go along with the salaries in there. So that's what we're keeping the same typical rates for that. One of the things through the design of for the project development, we go through several cycles, and sometimes it is important that we have some key steps that take place. So, and I'll use the Circle Bridge as an example. That went through a very extensive alternative analysis to see what made the most sense to go through for replacement. And I don't know if you had a presentation on that at the time, but it was whether or not to remove the bridges and start replacing them and shifting traffic onto one of the existing structures, or to do an off alignment bridge and move new traffic on there, and then start demoing the bridges and make a shift that way. And that's ultimately what they're going to do. But once that alternate analysis is done, there was probably some other investigation that was done on it. Let's say geotechnical, to know if there was some unforeseen geologic issues that need to be designed or considered around it. So that investigation happens first. And that's a lot of times you'll see us come in with our contracts with preliminary engineering and environmental work up front, some investigative type work, very similar to that South Cheyenne Canyon Bridge project, to basically more fully define the scope and to understand what the issues are going to be. So when we go and negotiate contracts for the final design, that we have a more defined scope, knowing what we're going to ask the designer to do, so they can be focused on what we're going to be asking for ultimately. Some of the other things that we take in consideration, we bring change orders in, is we have to add sub-consultants in. So as the project develops, if we have to bring in some additional public engagement staff or some additional specialized environmental staff to help mitigate some issue in the project, we do so. So sometimes those can trigger changes. But I wanted to talk maybe most about what we do from a cost. So in addition to locking in those engineering rates, when we get cost requests, we go through several different checks. We develop basically a top-down, what we would think from pricing. We look at it from a bottom-up standpoint, where we really look at the full-time equivalency of what's going to be the services the consultant's going to be providing. So that's top-down, bottom-up. We also look at it as a percentage of construction costs and in consideration for the level of difficulty. And we go into a comparison of what the costs are of similar contracts we have. So we're really looking at from 5 different ways before we agree to even initially accept that contract price. And then the city has a project management plan that we go through that's really supposed to go through a gateway process, that it gets an executive level buy-off on those contracts that are coming through. In this case, with the position that I have today as a city engineer, I review all those. As a person that has 19 years of consultancy, and Jennifer can attest this, as she was my client at one point in time years ago. You know, I'm used to building those from a consultant standpoint, and I put that same scrutiny from the city's perspective to make sure we're getting the best value. So I feel like we've got a lot of checks in place, and we're doing the right things from a cost development and cost review standpoint to making sure the city is getting the best value. On the 3 specific ones that Tom brought up, so you've got the Las Vegas and Royer one. Tom, I do know on that one, it had some alternative analysis that happened very early on that project, very early in RTA 2. And then it really sat on the shelf for a long time as it really got to a point where it had additional programming or funds that could be programmed. If you go and look on there, yes, there were some cost increases as the scope has gone through its different iterations or evolutions of project development. But several of those change orders were actually period of performance changes as well. I think the next one you said was Circle Drive Bridges. I hit on that and had
Gail,
Yes, sir.
before you move to the next one, can I just kind of ask some questions about that?
Yes.
The Royer one. I appreciate all the extra documentation you did, but it looks like that at least 4 of those were incorporate additional final design services, or had that phrase in several of those things. And so the first question on those is that like you've gotten an environmental assessment back now and your original plan needs to be changed to accommodate the recommendations of that environmental, or is that a scope change or a change from 20% design to 50% design? When I read that statement, change order 11, incorporated additional final design services, what does that really mean?
So in each of those, I'd have to go back and look at those older change orders, Jim, to tell you specifically what there was, but there's likely a scope change that triggered that at some point in time, whether it was a new railroad requirement, it could have been an environmental requirement. It could be a utility conflict that is newly been identified based on some other design change. It kind of ends up snowballing that you end up fixing one problem and it creates another that you now have to go through and do some design work. I do know on the specific one that what we're talking about today on change order 15, just going through the right-of-way process, as we've gone ahead, go and clean up some of the right-of-way there, is we're going to basically close that rail crossing Royer on the northish side of the rail tracks. We've been requested to put a cul-de-sac in that wasn't really envisioned at the time. And that's just an example of what's come up.
All right, then I noticed also that 8 of your change orders were $0 change orders. And so are those an example of where you've just done a time extension on the contract, but no increased change in scope or driving a dollar value?
Yeah, I think it was either most often it was a period of performance change. It looks like there was at least one instance where there was updating the billing rates for the current year, which is a stipulation that's allowable in the contract.
Okay, all right.
Scott's got a question.
Go ahead, Scott.
No, I just wanted to add, as someone who's managed some of these projects on both the consultant side and the agency side, and when a consultant wins a project, there's a lot of different phases of that project. The first one is kind of the alternatives analysis and public involvement. Then you go through preliminary design, and then you go through final design. If you were to ask a consultant right at the get-go, before they've done any of their investigation or public involvement or anything, to give a fixed price through the life of the project, that price would likely be much higher because they've got to build in the risk of not necessarily knowing what they're going to be designing based on what comes out of the alternative analysis phase. So doing it, you get a master contract, and then each of those phases tends to be a separate change order, because at the end of, say, the alternatives analysis phase, now you know what you need to go and do preliminary design for. So then you get a change order to do just that portion. And then once you go through the preliminary design, you have much more information about what utilities you need to coordinate with, what right of way you need to get. So then you get the next change order to go to that next phase. I think that's also why a lot of these contracts that are the bigger projects have multiple change orders, because each change order is for a different phase of the project.
Jim, this is Tom. A question for you then. Is the data that is produced, does it belong to the government at that point or to the contracting engineer design firm?
Well, I would say from a city contract, I believe the data really belongs to the city. And Jennifer, I believe your contracts are written the same. So she's nodding yes. I know you can't quite see her.
So if that's the case, is there a requirement that is usable for a handoff to any other firm?
There actually gets to be some it actually gets to be very tricky, and it becomes a liability from what would be the firm accepting that data. And the right to rely portions in their contract would have to be very much stipulated. And we would be this, you're gonna get kind of an illegal question. I don't know if someone's from the city procurement on, but unless we have a right to rely on there and basically waiving that second consultant from it, they have to go and basically revalidate everything.
So,
So
Gail,
it gets very difficult and it becomes more costly too, as they go back and have to go through that, basically that validation component of it.
so Gail, what you're doing is confirming to me that what you're really entering into is IDIQ contracts. Yes.
I went, that maybe a perspective is, that's not really the intent from an IDIQ, you know, it's for being multiple types of, or multiple projects of a certain type. This is one project going through multiple phases or different steps through the project life cycle. So I would say that's the difference. You may feel like it's semantics, but that's really what how our contracts are.
I'm just saying that if the risks outweigh any cost savings of it going elsewhere, then the preponderance of choice is all on the side of staying with whoever you started with.
Well, I have to tell you, I actually I haven't done it here recently, but I am not afraid and I have been known to cancel consultants' contracts when they've not performed well, and taken what we've had and basically either given them the right to rely clauses in their contract, which is risky for us as a government agency, or paid them to basically do a validation of the data I've given them. And picked up with where they need to do that.
Okay. I appreciate the proactive approach.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County. I just want to add on to what Gail stated. And then also Scott already took one of the things that I was going to say. I would just like to add though, that our vendors know that at any time we can go with anybody else. In fact, we, the county, have done an initial traffic study with one contractor, and we are going back out through, rather than our on-call, and going through the bid process on one of our projects. So I guess, you know, while we usually find that there is good reasons to stay with a vendor, that does not always happen. And I've seen it on both the city contracts and county contracts. Usually we are in control of whether we want to continue on with that vendor. So there is a high ability for the county and the city to be able to very well negotiate those contracts. Now, on the other hand, you know, we work with a lot of these vendors. We want to be fair. And if they're doing the work, then, you know, and we have those locked in rates, then we're able to very well control those costs and make sure that we do not get out of control or outside of the original scope, schedule, and budget. So I will let you know, I just want to let you know that we very carefully, and I think that all jurisdictions within PPRTA, we're trying to get as much money on those roads as possible. So we are looking at all those costs, not only at the beginning of those contracts, but as they're going through the process, to make sure that we're controlling those. Because in the end, ultimately, we want to get to the point where we're promises made, promises kept, and get as much money out on those roads as possible. So I just wanted to reaffirm that that just because we start with one vendor doesn't mean we always stay. And I have a good example of one where we are actually going out recently and going out for bid on the overall project design. So thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Hey, Jim, this is Ryan Bissiger. I have a couple of comments. Yeah, so Jennifer and Gail, thank you very much for your explanations here. And I, as a design professional, totally understand the inherent risk of taking over another consultant's work and the need, and this is something my company has done many times, having to evaluate that work as you take ownership of it as the design consultant. And if something does happen and if there is a claim, then you are responsible for that product, even if you didn't create the product. So I can totally understand that and appreciate where the city and the county are coming from. And then I just had one comment. It relates to both numbers 1 and 2, and with the Las Vegas and Royer UPR crossing and circle drives and the changing requirements of the railroads. That it's as the agencies know, UP has gone through a significant staffing change over the last several years, which has changed requirements. So something that could be agreed to by UP at one point in a project life cycle then changes over the last several years. And so I can appreciate and understand those changes that have resulted on those projects with having to meet new UP and BN requirements. With that, that's all I had to say. So thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Jim,
Yes, Reb.
we have 2 projects on here that I'm pretty sure. I know Karen Aspinall is involved in one that's asking to be recused.
Right.
This is just quote bookkeeping or record keeping. Rather than bifurcate, can you just vote on the total? But in the case of Karen, which I'm sure of is involved, would, just so the vote is correct, can we eliminate her, obviously, and say for that particular vote, it is 13-1 or 13-0 and with 1 abstention or something like that? And just, this has nothing to do with the subject because I've got a second comment. So what is your thought?
Yes, we will include the people that recuse themselves.
Okay. Second comment. I feel very confident right now, the way that the staffs have kept us well informed at times. And obviously Tom had some questions that I got clarified for myself. I feel very confident and would rather just personally, I'm going to recommend everything. I approve everything. Okay. I happen to feel confident that doing everything they can. Mr. Zelnock's comment about $200 million or $2 trillion. Hell, you can't get them to agree on anything. And when they do agree, then you got to go to the IRS and all the other. I don't think you're going to have an answer not in PPRTA 2, and that ends what, in 2 years, something like that. I'm just 4 years. Okay, I'm sorry. I short-lived. Literally, I have more confidence in the staff doing the best they can under the circumstances. And you talk about a swag is what we used to call it. And you guys can figure out the math or the grammar. But literally, I'm just saying I approve.
Well, before we make a motion, I've got another comment. And this, does anyone else have any comments or question? We kind of cut Gail off or some of the discussions. Tom, I kind of cut you short before you moved on to your number 2 project, but did you finish your comments, Tom?
Yes, I'm satisfied with the answers that were given. Thank you.
Okay, and Gail, did you finish with your answers? I kind of cut you off.
I did, as long as Tom is satisfied that I addressed what he was asking.
Okay, so let me ask a question, and this would be of all of the professional staffs, and I've brought this subject up before. When you have a change order or a scope change that is driven by moving from one level of design to another, you're moving from 20% design to 50% or 50 to 80 or whatever, would putting the reason for that price increase in there is we didn't change the project, we're just moving it to a different level of design. And I know that a lot of projects that you guys work on are design build, and some of them, you know, when we throw an original estimate out, they're back of the envelope 10 or 15% design figures. Once you get further in it, it's logical to me that as you go from a 10 or 15% to a 50 or 75 or an 80% design, there's going to be a price increase. That just makes sense, common sense to me. But would putting that in the documentation that you present to us is that this increase is driven by a change in design from 10 to 50 or that kind of stuff. Would that, and I guess the question is to the members of the CAC, would that help us understand a little better what some of these cost increases are related to? So I guess the question is to the staff, is that make sense? And to the CAC, would that help?
My comment is no, it's not going to help because I trust what they're doing.
It's not a trust factor, it's documenting a price change and
Okay,
why for and why for.
To what purpose would you put the staff to the additional effort to try and explain it to us, the CAC, for approval? In other words, it's on the record to who's going to pay attention to whether it's 10 or 15% or 50% or 80%, the numbers you use, I don't care. Literally, you're asking for a change order and it's been explained.
Well, and Jim, I think that we're trying to incorporate and do what you're asking without maybe giving that percentage anyway. And I'll just use the Circle Drive Bridge as an example. An old change order is change order 5, where the first line says it incorporated additional design phase services and construction phase services. And then it goes on to say the additional design services include stormwater engineering to revise the approach to permanent water quality and update the plans accordingly, ongoing railroad coordination, and it goes on from there. I think that as we're improving our reporting and our transparency to the CAC, you're already really achieving, I think, what you were asking us to do without focusing on the percentage, which can be a little nebulous anyway.
I totally understand. That's why I'm asking the question. What I'm trying to get ahead of, how do I say this politically correct? Well, I'm not politically correct. So, how do I get ahead of this of a board member saying this project went from $30,000 to $1.8 million, and that's just unacceptable? Well, that 30,000 was a preliminary design estimate. The 130, the higher number, is a 90% design. And so to me, logic says that's okay. I didn't necessarily change the scope. I just got into a further detail. And so now I have more clarification of what it's really going to cost. One was an estimate that was a 12-year in advance planning estimate. And the next one is I'm about ready to go out for bid and I've got a final estimate. It stands to reason to me that there's going to be an increase between those two periods of time.
Jim, I don't know if this thing is on or not for me.
You're on.
Okay, good. I guess one way of putting it as a member of the TAC here, excuse me, the PPRTA citizens group. I am a detailed person. And yes, the answer would be sure. That there's no question, Jim, what you just raised would be helpful to me. But I am going to add, and I really only know, I don't really know you that well, but I know Jennifer fairly well. And I am extremely highly impressed with what I hear from the staffs of the city of Colorado Springs and El Paso County. And while I like to hear the explanations and all, I have to usually go along with and approve it because I have a lot of confidence in the staffs of those two jurisdictions. I run into problems at time, and Jennifer well knows it, about whether or not it should be a roundabout or traffic signals. I have trouble about sometimes whether the speed limit on County Line Road should be 45 or 55. I can't get away from my career, but I do think we are blessed with two very good staffs. And I think it's fair, though, for Tom and you and any of us to raise questions. But I think our two representatives here today have done quite well in giving us answers. Yeah, I wouldn't mind more data. It would just make it a little bit easier. But I, for one, I haven't lived at the local level process, but I've been at every other level of government going through these. And I don't really have to have the detailed data, though I'd like it.
Okay, so I appreciate those comments, but let me just, for the record, as the staff knows, there's not many people more supportive of the professional staff than I, and I trust them explicitly. I'm just trying to cut down questions from folks above this. Our job is to ask the tough questions and make sure that we understand and we are fully supportive of the recommendation that we develop going to the board, and that we owe it to the public to be able to do this homework. And all I was simply trying to say, it's not a distrust issue at all. And so I was just asking if having some kind of information like that, would it eliminate some questions? If the answer from the staff is, as Gail said, it's kind of nebulous, it's not a clear defined percentage number, and that's hard to put your finger on and stand behind and support, then I support the staff recommendation. I was simply asking a question is, would it answer questions by just knowing that this was from preliminary design to final design, and expectation is cost is going to go up? And so that was all I was questioning. Not
Jim,
at all.
Jim.
Yeah.
Jim,
Yes.
this is Joan. I concur with what you say. The basis of your question was very good, because look at how much time now we have spent discussing this, that the more information that staff can give us, then it's the less questions we have to ask the staff. It has nothing to do with integrity issues, or whether staff is good or bad. We know these people, they work bloody hard for all of us, but more information to cut down on any confusion or misinterpretation of anything, I believe is always helpful.
And that, okay, within reason. And everybody knows I'm very sensitive to the workload that we put on the staff. And so that's the reason I'm asking the staff members that are present, the professional staff, is that an unreasonable thing to ask for? If so, say so. But if it's not, and it would help cut down and add some questions and stuff, then I'm just saying if it's applicable and it makes sense, add it.
Dave, is that?
Yeah, Jim, I'd just like to maybe underscore and agree with, I think, what's being said here, maybe just to help move things along a bit. I think that the memos Mike Chavez has prepared, I think, are done very well. I give him an A+. Could he have done maybe another paragraph or two to explain the 15th change order on a certain project, maybe add a little more detail? I think I would welcome that, just so in the future we would avoid questions like this. Give us a couple of paragraphs. What's really kind of behind the 15th change order? Shouldn't be that big of a problem. The issue that I have, though, I guess overall, aside from that, and I do plan to vote, by the way, for at least 5 of the 6 of these, the $1 million sole source contract to Wilson is of a concern to me. I am not sure that I believe, as the memo says, it would that if Wilson were not to have gotten the $1 million sole source contract for the Mark Shuffle widening job, it would triple the total cost. I don't know that I believe that. I do know that the public has concern in general with sole source contracts without going through a competitive bid process. I would like to, at least speaking for myself, highlight that for my colleagues here and to just illustrate that I plan to vote. If I can break out that one, I cannot in good conscience agree with the statement it would triple the cost, therefore it must be sole sourced to the magnitude of $1 million. I can't agree with that, but I also realize I probably should have popped that question earlier so it wouldn't come as a surprise to you. So with all due respect to Mike Chavez and the extraordinary work he's doing, I would like to just either abstain from voting on number 5 or to just vote no or ask that we can pull that out. So I cannot register in good conscience a yes vote on $1 million sole source contract. That's the issue I have with the list before us. Everything else I plan to vote for and would welcome a little more detail in the future.
Jim, Larry, Tobias.
Jim,
Go ahead.
Just one quick comment. You're asking for additional information for the members of the CAG, but I have also seen some of the minutes and watched some of the live presentations when you've gone to the board, and they have asked some very pointed questions, I guess you might say. Is this also not only what you're asking, give us additional information, but hopefully give the board that additional information so that you don't get into some of those questions and pointed questions toward the tag from the board. So it's a little bit clearer to them exactly, what we reviewed and what we approved or disapproved.
Yes.
Wow, that was short and
It's
sweet.
not for the. Yes. And to Dave's question, I would like to be able to address the concerns. We cut Gail off at number 1 or 2, and she was addressing Tom's questions. But Dave, you've got a question about number 5, that sole source contract. Gail, do you guys want to address some of his concerns on that?
I will do my best on that, Jim. Gail Sturdivant, City of Colorado Springs. So Dave, on that particular contract for Mark Shuffle, before we agreed to go down this path with Mark Shuffle, we actually did both a bottom up and a top down cost analysis to know where we thought the contract would come if we could rely on what was produced previously by Wilson and Company. And we came in with a targeted window between 800,000 and 1.2 million of where we thought the costs were going to be. As it turned out, without the property acquisition, the contract for Wilson is just under 900,000. So they were well within that price range. When we did that bottom up, we could not really rely and leverage the effort that that Wilson had done. It was going to be at least double that. And I know I put in the memo between 2 to 3 times that cost. And the reason being just the nature of the design files that they would have, to take that from Wilson and transfer that over, a consultant's not going to rely on that without going through and doing a whole quality check and process that really puts them back so far that they were going to be starting from scratch from a design effort. From a survey standpoint of what Wilson's going to have to do, they actually already have all that survey data. Again, we could take that and give it to another consultant, but they have confidence they've already gone through a quality control process, that they know what the data was at the time. They have to go back out and they're doing a verification. 2 things that changed in the scope too that that Wilson and any consultant would have to pick up, but again, Wilson in this case had a leg up on the stormwater design. They already had done a stormwater design and looked at stormwater conformance with what was the county's regulations in 2014, and everything's comply. So they've been able to do a side-by-side comparison to know what may have to change, and they've actually written that in the scope where there's points that need to change, be in conformance there. The other major thing that's changed since 14 to now is the what I call the locates regulation of the utility relocate, or the utility before. I actually probably need to remember the name of that new legislation. It was the
Is it the Sioux?
It's the Sioux stuff, right? The Sioux piece, that part would be, a lot of it would be the same as to what they would have to do with another consultant. The one advantage, again, Wilson has, because they've already been working with Colorado Springs Utilities, and it was Black Hills Energy, now Kinder Morgan, on having a lot of that early investigation done. They still have to go through the Sioux process and make sure that they're doing at least a Class D investigation on that to confirm with what they're doing is still good in compliance, and with the stormwater updates, if there's new conflicts that are identified, to go through that conflict resolution. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but there's a lot that's would have gone into this. It's not just, well, Wilson did it, we're going to go back to him. We actually did those, again, that the cost evaluation, both from the top down and the bottom up, looked at it from a construction cost standpoint too, to kind of know where we thought things were left and what it would take for the level of effort to get it to complete. And felt like the price we were getting from Wilson was more than advantageous than what we would get going out to another consultant.
Thank you.
Yes.
If I may just follow up with a related question.
Absolutely.
Again, I think many of you may have seen, there was a newspaper article that just ran a few days ago about CDOT giving massive sole source contracts. I think the article even talked about the majority of the engineering consulting work that's going out is sole sourced without going through the competitive process. I may be oversimplifying that a bit. I think there's a risk publicly now that frankly, that the news is local and that the scrutiny level has raised. I think it's a matter of time until someone raises a similar sole source question about engineering contracts to this board or to other boards. I'd just like to go on the record as saying, I share the concern that was written about a few days ago in the newspaper. I think it was front page about that. I would like to ask maybe a question, Gail, that just in terms of process, I do respect the fact you're relatively new there. Could contracts like this, though, have been competitively thought through in advance so that the contract would start at the early conceptual stages, and then the contract would be competitively sourced from the beginning to go through this point? Where it looks like now is that you're at a fork in the road, and you could argue the perception the public might get is that we could have seen this coming, and arguably the competitive sourcing could have happened a year ago at the outset, rather than giving the illusion now that we are competitively sourcing, or that we're sole sourcing now, when we could have avoided the problem in the first place a year ago. Is that fair?
I think there are two portions of that question, and Jennifer, you may want to jump in on part of this. Initially, when the Mark Shuffle Road project was conceived, and this was underneath the county, they did go through a competitive bid process to identify Wilson and Company. And you're right, there was an opportunity. We did have a fork in the road. I have to tell you, from a city's perspective, there's been some political things that have changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 months, that this was, even though we knew there was these systemic safety issues, it wasn't maybe necessarily the same priority as it's getting to now, and same attention. And the fact that both city and county administrators and elected officials have been discussing the right-of-way changes and the need to elevate this project, I think it's really changed the priority. So I don't know that we maybe had as much insight to go through and do another competitive process. But in this case, I don't know that even if there had been the opportunity to go back maybe months sooner, that we would have made a different change or taken a different direction than we are today. And I'm just kind of a side note, I am very aware, I did go through that same article. The practices that CDOT goes from a procurement standpoint appear very different and have very different levels of scrutiny than what the city and county, and I would say the city and county have a lot more levels of scrutiny and more, at least my perception is, Jennifer, and I think you're affirming that as well, that it's we have a lot more safeguards and checks in place to make sure we're doing what's the right thing, in the best interest of our citizens and the best use of public money through the process. And I will mention one thing too. Jim, you said design build. The city actually right now is not doing any transportation design build projects. And if you go back to that CDOT article, a lot of that was design build or CMCG type contracts. Those aren't really contracts that the city's pursuing. We have very traditional design bid build where the city is able to keep a lot of control over the contracts and the pricing at all the different levels. And I think Jennifer, you're in the same boat as well.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be accusational there. It was just an example for discussion.
No problem. And I just wanted to make that point of clarification because to Dave's point, a lot of that article was focused on CDOT procurement, and they did talk a lot about design build and CMCG. And there are a lot of good potential opportunities for those maybe in the future, but those also have to be thought out and competitively bid. They just competitively bid a different way. And we're not in a position to do that right now with the projects we have in PPRTA too.
Great. Okay, thank you. Dave, did Gail answer your questions or address your concerns?
I respect her answer. I'm not sure that I fully understand the response. I do respect the thought that went into it, though. Again, just the notion of $1 million sole source contract gives me concern, given I'm still the new kid on the block here and don't have a deep history in how we got to the point of sole sourcing this $1 million contract. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Jim,
Yes.
As I said earlier, I like the detail. I think the addition would be helpful, the sort of thing you recommended. I'd like our staffs to think about that. I respect two of my colleagues from the HAC have raised questions. And I think they're good questions, and I think we've had a good discussion. I think we really ought to move on to a vote. And I want to say that with no disrespect to my two colleagues on the HAC, I am going to try and be the one to make the motion to approve these because I think they've given very good explanations. I think we ought to go ahead and approve it. And so it's up to you, Mr. Chairman, but I would like to call for a motion.
Go ahead. If there's not any further discussion or questions, go ahead and make the motion.
I so move that we approve all of 5 of these projects.
Jim,
Ryan,
second.
yeah. Jim,
Right.
can you check with Jennifer? She had her mic on. Are you okay? Okay, Jennifer's okay.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve the city's request. I will note for the record that Karen has recused herself from this vote. So in this case, because of her involvement in some of the projects. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say no.
No.
There were 2 no's. They were that I can see. That was Dave and
Joan.
Yes.
Okay. And I think I understand from Dave's comments his concern. So at some point, Joan, just so I have it to be able to explain to the board next week.
My concern was the same, sole source
Okay.
contract.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. Thank you both. And thank you all for that discussion. This is the kind of discussion the board expects us to have. And so a little longer than normal, but I think a good, healthy discussion. So thank you, staff and members for doing that. So let's go to the next item, which is the county. Jennifer?
Mr. Chair, the item we have is a request for a line item transfer the West Colorado Avenue project. And this is directly in relationship to two items we have for 6C for contract amendments for FHU and also Wildcat Construction. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to kind of speak to those at the same time.
Sure.
Okay, so the first item we have is a request for a line item transfer and a budget increase for Colorado Avenue. We are winding up with final project on project costs on this project and are requesting a line item transfer, and that is to fund two contract amendments for both the construction side and then the design side. I would note that we also have a contract with Jacobs Engineering that we are not requesting to amend at this time. And Jacobs provided the construction oversight of the project. So we are requesting an additional $420,000. We are requesting that line item transfer to fund that budget increase from our Eastonville project. We are requesting from the Eastonville project because we are still in the design phase. And so we have plenty of time to, as we receive additional funds through the regular budget process, to go ahead and backfill that. But the purpose for the line item transfer and the budget increase is for two contract amendments. The first is with Wildcat Construction. And that contract amendment is about 400,000. Sorry, gonna go back to it. Lost my place. 448, 708. And the purpose for that is, we are working through the finals, overs and unders of the project. And we had some additional costs for potholing, for some landscaping, the water quality pond, refurbishing the Buffalo Lodge sign that we impacted, some additional costs for historical requirements mitigation from the requirements from the Historical Society that we had to do, some additional traffic control survey, electrical conversions, and some additional ADA pedestrian ramps. So, and then the second cost increase comes from the design side. And this is additional requirements as we close out the project. As we acquired property, we are resetting property pins. We are finalizing those right-of-way plans that we have to deposit with the clerk and recorder, doing final right-of-way monumentation. And then we also have continuing litigation that is ongoing for the condemnation parcel that we are working with the city on. So providing some additional funds for that. Other than that, we are trying to wrap up any final costs on this. And so this is what I would expect to be our final budget increase request and line item transfer, and then also contract amendments. We are finalizing LOMRs and closing out any permitting. So I think we're closing this project. I would note, we haven't had a lot of meetings in person. One of the things that I wanted to note is that this project has won 3 awards, one through ACEC, the American Council of Engineering Companies, then also APWA, American Public Works Association. And then we also recently, the project team was awarded an award through National Association of Counties, which is something that our commissioners are accepting in the next week. So, and we are working very hard to close out this project and work with the city of Colorado Springs and our contractors and city of Manitou Springs to finish any final work. And but if you've been down at Manitou, it's really has transformed the neighborhood. We've seen a lot of changeover, and we are seeing a lot of increased business development along the corridor, which is part of the purpose for the project. So we're very, very excited about what it looks like, how it ended up, and very excited to close out the project.
Jennifer, Rick Hoover.
Mhm.
Went through it. Beautiful job. Congratulations. Just it's a fantastic change in the west end of our city.
I couldn't agree more. Transformational for that region and that stretch of road is an understatement for what that represents for an entry into that part of town, that historic part of town, and fantastic job for the county's lead. But it's a team effort by a lot of people on that effort, and fantastic work. Good job. Great example, and congratulations on the awards.
Jim,
Yes, Reb.
you want to do 6B for Jennifer's capital? It's a vote for recommendation.
Let me pull up the. I gotta
Mr.
find
Chair,
the
there's
agenda again.
two items on 6C that I haven't addressed yet, so I don't, or sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay, I'll go ahead and address those. And the other two contract amendments that we do have for today are, and requesting your positive recommendation for, is we do have our change order for our McLaughlin and Old Meridian roundabout, and that is for Transportation Resource Services, which is our property acquisition vendor, for an additional $14,000. We are acquiring a few additional minor properties at the intersection of Rolling Thunder and Meridian, and that's in relationship to some push button pedestrian at that intersection related to the overall project, and also to finalize some property acquisition with another property owner in that area. So just some additional small minor costs that we ran into for that project. And then also our 2021 crack seal contract. This is our annual crack seal contract. We rebid our crack seal contract this year, and this is for $340,000 with American Pavement Solutions. Happy to answer any other questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I recommend approval of item 6B, the two change orders. Or
I would second that motion.
Discussion?
Yes. Go ahead.
And Jim, Jennifer, I have a question. This transfer from the Eastonville Road project, is this the, as I remember history, isn't this the second transfer we've done out of that project?
I believe so. I'd have to go back and look. But what I would say is that as we have received additional budgeting funds, we are putting those back through the regular budgeting process. So I can certainly provide you the history of where we are with the Eastonville project and the overall budget.
We are nearing the final design of that project, as I understand from some of your previous presentations.
On Eastonville?
Eastonville.
We are working to, well, we've done the traffic study and we're working to get underway with the preliminary design.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mhm.
Just want to echo the comments. It's an extraordinary job, a great package. Jen, congratulations to you, the staff, everyone out there. The Manitou project is truly a transformation of the community. So well done. Congratulations on the awards. Keep up the great work. And I do plan to vote for this one. So thank you.
John.
Jennifer, just a quick question on the crack seal contract. I noticed it's out of Wisconsin. We didn't have any local companies or Colorado-based companies, or were their bids too high, or what was the story?
I'll have to look. I believe, and I can follow up with that. Oh, so we actually had two bids, A1 Chip Seal and American Pavement Solutions.
Okay.
And our lowest bid came from American Pavement Solutions. Our previous contract, we didn't have that vendor, the one we're recommending this time, American Pavement Solutions this last time, but we had them the last time we had the last go around, and they've performed very, very well. So they're doing a lot of good work. We went with the low bidder.
Okay, well, that's fine. I'm just curious.
Absolutely.
Jim, are you there? Jim, you're mute.
Jim, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was had something to say to the wife and I forgot to unmute. I apologize. So I'd like to get a vote separately on 6B. So I'm entertaining a motion for a recommendation of the line item transfer on West Colorado Avenue.
I made that motion, Jim.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. For
And
Rev.
Dave seconded.
And Dave seconded. Okay. All those in favor of item 6B, line item transfer, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item 6C, El Paso, the remaining El Paso County projects.
And I'm sorry if I stepped on Jennifer's toes. I 6B normally comes before 6C. Didn't you give your presentation on 6C?
Yeah.
And that's why I thought they should be separate.
So I hear a motion. Do I have a motion to approve 6C, which is the remaining projects for El Paso County?
So
moved, Ed Dills.
Second, Joan.
Ed Dill's motion, Joan second. Thank you very much. So no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that information.
Thank you.
Manitou Springs.
Jim, just before Manitou Springs comes up, we now have another city staff member, and I'd like to say thank you. Travis is now here to back
Oh,
up.
no.
Yeah, well, I know. I
Welcome,
think we're
Travis.
fortunate we have the two top dogs.
Three top dogs.
Oh, I'm
And-
sorry.
oh,
I forgot about Corey.
All right. So Manitou Springs, who would you like to present?
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. Jeff Jones, Manitou Springs Public Works Director. Today, the city of Manitou Springs brings forward an effort regarding approval to use $357,000 for Manitou maintenance funds for curb-to-curb paving of our Mountain View and partial Clarksley Road area, following a $1.1 million sewer and water replacement project, which is in the corridor between our Crystal Hills and Crystal Park community. The city engineer deemed that this contract that we inherited when we first started here, the pavement patchback laid out by the utility improvement contract was not sufficient considering the condition of the road afterwards. So the effort that we're asking for today would drastically improve the road conditions for our customers who live in this area. And the patchback of the digging for the burial of the new sewer and water lines is only going to be approximately 5 feet on either side of the dig. And if anybody has ever been up in the Crystal Hills area up there will know that the roads are, some of them are 33 foot wide. So we were going to have new water lines, new sewer lines in the road, and about 10 feet of pavement in the middle of it. So with a lot of alligator cracking and a lot of insufficient road surface on the outside. So we decided that if we're going to spend $1.1 million on a project, we need to make sure the road surface is in the proper working order for years to come for our folks in our community. So with that, once again, asking for permission to for this effort to complete our project and improve the corridor where our folks live up in that area. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions?
Yes. Is there 300 or is there 300? I'm going to round number it, $360,000 in their maintenance fund? available?
There is. As a matter of fact, there's $643,071 in our maintenance fund. Part of this is going for that. And then I also have another effort that'll be coming up next month to the board for paving of an additional 4 other roads, which is approximately around $250,000.
Jim, just to clarify, I got a question, Ed Dills.
Go ahead.
The total project's 1.1 million, but the PPRTA portion's 358,000 rounded off.
Correct.
Okay, so,
Good
all right,
point.
that's what I wanted.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. The $1.1 million for the actual project is a loan we got from the state of Colorado revolving fund loan program for water and sewer replacement for the cities of and counties of Colorado.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Do I have a motion to approve Manitou's request for this project for paving?
Jim, this is Joan. I move to approve Manitou's request.
Second.
Who was the second?
Reb.
Okay, Reb. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Okay, great. Thank you very much, guys, for that presentation, and good luck on the project.
Thank you.
All right. Item, what is this one? 7A, transit.
Good afternoon. This is Brian Vituli. I'm the Transit Planning Supervisor with the City of Colorado Springs.
Hey, Brian.
Metropolitan Transit with your monthly transit report. Good afternoon. For our fixed route services for the month of May, we provided just about 158,000 trips during the month. So that's up 19, almost 20% as compared to May of 2020. So, you know, for the foreseeable future, we'll be seeing pretty healthy increases of service or ridership on our service because we're comparing to last year when we were in the middle of the pandemic. So we are thankful that ridership is slowly creeping up. We do have a long way to go to get back, but we're encouraged by the signs that we're seeing. For our ADA paratransit service, we provided about 7,600 trips in May of 2021. So that's up about 178% as compared to May of 2020. For our specialized paratransit taxi choice option, we just restarted that program actually in March. So the numbers are still pretty low, but it looks like we had 8 trips. 4 on the weekdays and 4 on Saturday in May of 2021. And for our van pool service, we operated 7 vans in May with 42 active riders making just over 790 trips. So that's up 146% from May of 2020. And a project update. We just ended our public process for our fall 2021 service changes. The public comment period was open through last Wednesday, June 30th. And we're actually just going through the feedback and the survey results and the comments that we received through customer service. And we'll be finalizing our recommendation and getting that out to the public. Most of the services, if approved, will be implemented at the end of September. The downtown shuttle service, we included it with this public process, but that will not be implemented before April 24th of 2022 at the earliest. Are there any questions on the report or on the fall service change process?
Brian, this is Jim. I've got a question. What was the public feedback on the downtown shuttle service?
Well, it was all positive. You know, a lot of folks see the need of providing a really good option that encourages people to park their vehicle in any one of the parking garages downtown and use a really high frequent shuttle to get to all the downtown destinations. So it was all very positive feedback.
Good. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Brian?
Jim, this is Dave. I've got just a quick question for Brian.
Sure, Dave.
Hey, on the taxi choice option, just roughly, what's the range of cost per ride? I know there's the number of rides is very low, so that can skew the results. But just roughly in a range, what's the cost per ride you're seeing? Is it a flat fee? Is it comparable with an Uber ride? Just to help me understand how that's cost or how it's cost effective and what the actual costs are.
Well, the actual cost, our ADA paratransit service, it's double the fixed rate fare. So it's $350 for an ADA paratransit ride. And I believe it's the same or a little more than $350 for the taxi choice option. But you know, there is a 7-mile range. You can't go farther than 7 miles from origin to destination.
And that's the cost the passenger pays, right? But is that the true cost that the system pays?
No, it isn't. I don't have those figures with me right now, but
That's okay.
We can get that for you.
Yeah, just in a future update, I'd just like to see what roughly the cost per ride is. I think we'd all be surprised that it's surprisingly effective to do it that way, which I think is going to be counterintuitive. That was the only point I was hoping you could help me make.
Well, the point is, you know, ADA paratransit service and the specialized taxi choice option, you know, the trip cost is very high. That's why we're trying to encourage people, if they are physically able, to use our fixed route service. But this is a service that's reserved for those who truly need it. But yeah, there's no way around it. They are more expensive trips to cover.
Okay. Any other questions for Brian? Thank you very much, Brian. Good as usual.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you.
Okay, item 7B, Colorado Springs monthly change order and property acquisition. It's an information item. Any questions for the city on the change order report? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to 7C, the county's monthly change order report. Any questions for Jennifer? All right, hearing none, moving along. Item number 8, administrative actions and reports, recent board actions. Rick?
Yes, sir. So the highlights are in the CAC agenda. The main item I'd like to highlight is that the PPRTA board postponed the PPRTA 3 matrix item to their July meeting and did not go into any depth at their June meeting. I think everything else is hopefully self-explanatory, but I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Okay, hearing none. Item 8B, the staff review.
And this is just the results of my quarterly drive around to confirm that projects are, the capital projects are moving along and have their signs posted, and that the maintenance items, particularly the concrete, are confirmed, or I can confirm what was reported in the quarterly reports by the member governments. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Rick, would I be out of line by seeing that if anyone is curious about what you do, that you would welcome them to ride along with you one afternoon?
Certainly.
If you want a nice conversation with Rick riding around town looking at poured concrete and things, and you have nothing else better to do in the afternoon, then Rick would be glad to take you around. I've done it, and it's interesting to It's part of that public trust of putting eyes on target. Someone said they did this, and Rick makes these spot checks on stuff to make sure that what they say they've done. So good job, Rick. Thank you.
My next drive around month will be September.
All right. Okay, item number 9, agenda topics for next meeting. I think we kind of heard, Dave, were you suggesting a topic for maybe next month in one of your comments?
Yes, actually, just an overall, I'd love to see this group stay updated as to the infrastructure, the $1 trillion stimulus, or whatever the Congress calls that. The sense I have is that one of the old sayings goes that the fast rat gets the cheese. That certainly may apply here. Others would say, no, the fast rat gets the trap. So, but regardless, I'd like to at least be considered there as we start to chase the cheese that we know is going to be coming out of Washington, D.C. So to whatever extent we can be positioned for, we can encourage the staff to take the big picture. It may just be a simple 5-minute overview. Here's what isn't going on, and here's the likely impact and consequences on all of our transportation and infrastructure programs. So just a brief overview as to what's going on a big picture level, be it stimulus or other kinds of great opportunities.
Okay, thank you. I think, in addition, I think the importance is for the members of the CAC to have in our mind the differences between the people and the various programs that are working on our roads, from 2C and where that money comes from and who does it and what it does, the PPACG and the TIP and the federal funding side of things, and then what we do in the RTA. It's unlikely that we're going to get federal funding for new work because it has to be on the list of approved projects. But I think it's important as members of the Citizens Advisory Committee that we understand those nuances and the differences, so that when our constituents raise questions or ask questions on Nextdoor or whatever the case, we're informed about what's going on, so that we can help, in some cases, set the record straight. So being aware and monitoring those things as they come into the city would certainly be, while not directly beneficial, the RTA, informational that we as members of the CAC would have. So thank you for that. So item number 10, communications. Anyone have any announcements they want to make?
Actually, this is Cindy Tompkins.
Hey, Cindy, welcome.
Thank you. I have a dilemma. I'm hoping maybe some of you can help. We have a project in Rama. I got a grant for a drainage project, and I cannot find an engineer who will come out to Rama. I have written letters. I have called everyone I know, and I hate to give grant money back, and I'm looking for any help anyone can give me.
Okay.
So if you have anything or direction, please let me know.
Contact Cindy.
Yes, please.
Cindy, this is Scott Barnhart. I will get our drainage folks to get in touch with you.
That would be great. Thank you.
And Cindy, this is Dave Zelenak. I'll also have our drainage folks get in touch with you, so you may have a competitive opportunity without having to sole source.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Cindy, this is Jennifer too. Is if you need any help, let us know. All of our on-call contracts and our contracts do have the piggyback clause, so you're always welcome to talk with our procurement folks. And if you need any help, we're always happy to help in any way. But I'll let Mr. Barnhart and Mr. Zelnock, thank you.
Oh,
it's Monday
wonderful.
For me, so Mr. Zelnock, talk to you first. But if you ever need any help, Cindy, and we are following up on that other item, just so that we discussed.
Yes,
so I'll be following up with you, ma'am.
All right, thank you very much, guys. And then my last thing is just the El Paso County Fair starts Saturday. You should all come out my way. So that's all.
Yeah.
That was a
Send Send the pony with the saddlebags to Rama. Yes. All right. I just went through there and I'll be coming back through there soon. So I understand. All right. Any other comments from members of the CAC or members of the audience?
Jim, can we talk afterwards?
You may. Do I have to listen?
No, you can turn
Okay.
you can take the earplugs out like you are now and act just like I'm your wife talking.
Oh, no, I would never do that in front of her.
Jim, can I add something? This is Gail Sturdivant.
You may, Gail.
I just wanted to give the CAC an update on some other federal funding pursuits. It was already on my list, Dave, so it was kind of fortuitous you brought this up. So on some discretionary funding items, the city did find out last week that we were not successful getting the infra grant that we requested to help support the South Academy project.
Oh.
I know, it's very disappointing for everyone. We are still submitting our raise grant application for the Fontenaro or the UP bridges over Fontenaro. That is actually due on the 12th, and we've got that ready to go, and we'll likely be submitting early tomorrow. And then I did want to mention one of the other things that's out there that may be put in this infrastructure package that Mr. Zelenak was mentioning is that some of our senators have been looking at putting earmark requests in. The city and county have been working together on and with CDOT for that matter, working on two different earmark requests for interchanges to support access in and around Peterson Air Force Base. One is for their North Gate there or Peterson Road and Platte Avenue, and then also for Powers Boulevard and Airport Road. So we'll wait to hear what's happening from that. It sounds like those dollars really got significantly less than what they were originally talking about. It may just be $2 to $4 million available for the senators for their request, but it's still something that we're asking for support on.
Okay, thank you, Gail. All right, I want to thank all of you for your time and patience during our discussions. Everybody's comments mean something, and I think we make a difference. And so I just want to thank you all for your time and being here and putting up with me and the discussion. So everyone have a great week and a great month, and we'll talk to you next month. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Jim.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Cindy's phone number.
I'm gonna try. I don't know whether I got his cell phone. I'm looking it up right now.